You're up, bud.
Welcome to, hey, remember we had to give it a few seconds here. Welcome to a Week 11 edition of the Red Zone Extra, sponsored in part by Big O Tires. The A-team right now, we are at the Intercontinental Presidente, or is it the Presidente Intercontinental?
I just think it's a good 1-2 punch. When you got both those words in the name, we're good.
But it's a great hotel.
Media Hotel, we had to stay here.
Yeah, it's a fantastic hotel, and you know what? We watched the Chiefs pull out a 24-17 win against the Los Angeles Chargers last night at Estadio Azteca, where the air was plenty thin, there was plenty of drama, but you know, there was a lot to take away from this game. Defense looked pretty good. They overcame Patrick Mahomes' career low 182 yards passing. A lot to take away from this. What did you take from this, Sam?
I think that you can go one of two ways. Like I think a lot of people, a lot of Chiefs fans have made up their mind about this Chiefs team already. And I think that you can look at that game and think they beat a worthy opponent playing their C- game. The defense was great. The offense was pretty bad. I think overall maybe a C- game. They lost a lot of opportunities, left on the field. So won the game playing, subpar, and got through more injuries. So once they get healthy, they should be better. Or you can look at it and be like, dude, it's week 11. Their next game is going to be in December. I'm tired of talking about the injuries. I'm tired of like all this stuff. Whatever you thought before the game, I think you can get confirmation in that game.
And I think now that we have Sam McDowell joining us, because I accidentally skipped over the introductions. Sam McDowell to my left, Sam Mellinger to my far right, and of course, the incomparable Vahe Gregorian to my immediate right. And
Needs no introduction.
He
From
needs
Mexico.
no introduction.
We're in Mexico.
But Sam is correct. I think here we are in week 11, and we're still talking about a lot of the same issues that we've talked about week in and week out. But I think this is, I think we have to start worrying, is this a Super Bowl caliber team?
Yeah.
Because we have a month left in the regular season, and we're still seeing a lot of issues here. And this offense last night, for whatever reason, started out slow. The altitude may have played a role in that, but I don't know what to make of this team yet. Here we are entering the bye week, and I believe the Chiefs still don't have a complete identity. Would you agree with that, Vahe?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And as Sam was speaking, I think Sam Mellinger was speaking. Senior. I just got thinking about it. Every Chiefs game seems like, I feel like we've used this term a little bit, but not that much this season, the Rorschach test. Like, you can see in this what you want, and I thought Sam really laid it out well with his conversation with Sammy Watkins last night that explored each aspect of this. I mean, you really can find what you want to in this team. It seems to me that my takeaway from last night is the takeaways, though. That was 4 interceptions for a team that Tyrann Mathieu pointed this out really well the other day, stated it really eloquently, and it proved somewhat prophetic that they have not made that play. And they actually did in Detroit. I mean, they kind of had that moment, those couple moments at the goal line, but this was a big moment for the defense last night, on a night where you wouldn't exactly say Patrick Mahomes faltered, but he wasn't the guy that we've seen change games until some glimpses in the second half. The offense was really off kilter in the first half, and so back to your original question here, Herbie, which is, have we seen the fully formed team? I feel like we've never seen the fully formed team. Injuries is part of that. Ups and downs on either side of the ball is part of that. I still lean towards the possible here. I don't know what to expect, but I feel like the possible is all still in play.
There's a logical case that this is the kind of team that's going to peak in January and be the kind of team that's probably going to have to play in the wild card round. Probably. Not for sure. They still have a chance to get the bye. But the team that nobody wants to play out of that wild card round. Because the defense is playing pretty well. Phil Rivers, we can make the jokes. But the defense still had to make 4 interceptions. They still had to stop it at the end. That's 2 out of 3 games. I know they went limp in Nashville, but that's 2 out of 3 games that they've gotten to stop at the end that they needed to win the game. And I like the offense part of it. The air, like, that's a real thing. Like, I think Denver sometimes is overblown, but you walking around that locker room last night, guys were like, oh my God, I've never been this tired. I was tired from the first play. I mean, that was a real deal. And I also think the field, that field was pretty bad. There were divots all over the place. And this is a team that's built not exclusively, but primarily on speed. It's speed and precision, and that takes that away. And Tyreek Hill gets hurt. So there were some things going against them. They still got through it. So you can look at it optimistically. That's still there. But I just think it's like clock is ticking.
Tick-tock, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like, let's see it.
Quick question about the air to throw this back at you guys too. Okay, air had an impact on them. I think that seemed kind of clear. They were free to go to altitude during the week and
Yeah.
absolutely dismissed it. And Andy doesn't really let us in on all the ins and outs of that decision, right? I mean, Herbie, you asked him about it the other day, and he kind of just gave we studied it, we're doing this, but he doesn't really explain why. I assume that part of the reason why is they just feel like it's not worth all the extra commotion of travel and getting more out of routine. But I don't know. Did they do the right thing? Would they have been better prepared with the days in altitude?
I didn't mind them being in Kansas City all week. I didn't see the issue with that. To me, what stood out, though, to just hammer on what Sam said, the secondary is something that was the biggest concern going into the season. Was the secondary. The secondary was lights out last night. I mean, you look at the numbers, and the only reason Phillip Rivers threw for 353 yards is because the running backs got him. And Hunter Henry. I mean, Keenan Allen had 71 yards. You'll live with that. Mike Williams had 2 catches. Those were the only 2 wide receivers. And obviously Mike Williams had the big catch at the end of the game. Might have gotten away with a little bit of a push-off, but those are the only production from your wide receivers against the secondary last night. The secondary also had, the Tyrann Mathieu interception, the Daniel Sorensen interception. I was going to bring that up early. And they had a third interception, right?
Yeah, four.
But one of them
Fenton.
was naughty though. But in Fenton, the secondary comes up with 3 interceptions last night. So
And Kendall Fuller's out still.
right. But Fenton's playing well enough that I kind of wonder how that situation is going to shake out once Fuller comes back. But the secondary's played really well.
And a lot of that stuff also was playing hand in hand with a guy I know that you've written about extensively in Frank Clark. Frank Clark had a monster game last night. Played 69 defensive snaps, a lot of snaps last night. Sacked, 3 quarterback hits, forced a fumble. What did you see out of him last night? I know you actually asked him a couple of questions during his post-game press conference.
Yeah, I just thought I think the explosion is getting back. There was one specific play where he pressured Phillip Rivers, where he ducked under the left tackle, and it was a move on tape. And I know Sam watched a lot of tape of Frank Clark early this season, and so did I. I didn't see that move from him on tape in the first 3 weeks of the season.
Saw it in Seattle.
In Seattle, yeah. In Seattle, you saw it a lot. Yep. And if he has a pinched nerve, as he said in training camp, it makes sense to where that would be a move where he did not feel comfortable making. He sat out 2 weeks, but basically it was 2.5 because it was a Thursday game. As soon as Brett Veach got into the locker room last night, he went over to Frank Clark, and Frank Clark said, "I told you what I can do when I'm healthy."
Yeah.
Wow. That's a conversation without us media that pretty illuminating of exactly how he's feeling now. Maybe we're going to see this guy for the last half of the season.
There was also, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, go.
Just on Frank, there were some plays, again, like, it has been pretty stark of what you see on tape of him in Seattle and what we've seen weeks 1 through 8 or whatever in Kansas City. And another play, you mentioned the dip around the bend, as they always call it. He also in Seattle, he used to just wreck guys. He would go in and just lower his shoulder and just boom, and just drive guys back. We haven't seen that with the Chiefs. Saw it last night, And look, we can talk about like backup tackles, on both sides for the Chargers, and that matters. But they're still NFL guys.
Yeah.
And my point of bringing this up though was he was wrecking the interior guys, and those are starters. You know what I mean? Like, he just looked explosive, strong, quick in a way that he hasn't before.
When you don't just lose your ability to play at his age.
Right.
It seemed like there was something going on. And I know a lot of people, when we wrote the story about him having that pinched nerve, thought, he's making an excuse. But excuse is also reality in this case. Yeah. He's injured.
Always a fine line between excuses and reasons, right? I mean,
sure.
And do you remember the thing I was thinking about was, I think it was after the 3rd preseason game, maybe the 2nd one, probably the 3rd. I think I don't know when he pinched the nerve, but I remember him smiling and talking about getting ready to unleash the repertoire. And I think he simply wasn't capable for a while. And it is a good reminder to all of us that when something is mysterious about a precipitous drop-off in a player's performance that is in his prime, maybe there's something more going on than what we know.
We did see him wearing a sleeve at one point, and I remember a play in the Ravens game, and I don't remember how early in that game it was, where he came off and his arm was sort of hanging to where I thought maybe he had just got a stinger because he came back in the game.
I thought it was a shoulder. Like I wonder shoulder or elbow because that and look, like I am a noted orthopedics expert, right? But it looked, the thing that he was wearing, it just looked like an elbow, shoulder, something like that.
Yeah.
A pinched nerve.
But he said he was feeling it all down his arm. So
yeah, he was stiff.
You're certified by Twitter. You're a Twitter doctor.
Absolutely.
He was
Certified
the first,
Twitter
he was
doctor.
the first guy I knew to get his Twitter medical degree.
I think one of the things that really jumped out to me was the fact that the defense took it upon themselves, knowing that the offense was struggling. I mean, a lot of defensive players after the game, even Frank Clark, when he was talking to us after the game, said they knew they had to put it upon themselves, and they embraced that. And I thought that was huge against a divisional rival. The Chargers are now 3 games behind the Chiefs in the AFC West. I think you can pretty much write them off. But with an emerging defense, because y'all are right, we have not seen a complete game out of this Chiefs team yet. I think the closest we could argue was Week 7 when Patrick Mahomes got hurt, but we still haven't seen that complete game yet.
Yeah. I think you're probably, because of that, more encouraged coming out of this game, even though they didn't play well, because we saw the Chiefs win a game when their offense wasn't great. And when's the last time we could say that the offense wasn't great and we saw the Chiefs win despite of the offense not playing well? The offense has had to play well for this team. The offense played lights out last week and they still couldn't win a football game.
I thought that the defense, for the first time in a really long time, helped win a game not in Minnesota, but against the Vikings in a way that they hadn't in a long time. But this was a different level. They gave up 17 points and set up 7 for their offense.
Yep.
That's incredible. Like that's the kind of stuff that a team built on defense does.
And if Tyrann Mathieu catches the second interception,
I think what also impressed me about that defense last night was the Chargers got into the red zone or deep in the Chiefs territory 4 times in that first half and had to come away with just 3 field goals. And that was pretty huge holding them there.
Yep.
Nothing to add to that. Yeah, I felt the same way. Although for some reason I was distracted by looking at a defensive stat. I wanted to see how many pass breakups Chris Jones had because one went off his helmet. And I was trying to figure out whether he got credit for that one. I assume he did. That's a pass broken up, right?
I kind of think we should discuss sort of the elephant in the room as far as Mexico City, what we all thought of it. Yeah. Herbie, you're the only one that's kind of been super close to this area before. Heck, you've already told all of us you're going to retire here now. So,
new retirement spot. I love this place. I thought the atmosphere was fantastic. It was unique to me walking around before the game. The concourse here, you two were out there as well. Matt Castle jerseys. I saw a Sammy Parker jersey out there.
Roger Staubach was the one that stood out to me.
Yeah, Roger Staubach was out there. A lot of Tom Brady fans out here, but I thought the atmosphere was electric. The anthem, both the Mexican anthem and
was awesome.
The Mexican anthem was
awesome.
Amazing. I got chills.
I got chills.
Was so cool.
And listening to the entire stadium sing, that was it was a chilling moment. But I know you wrote about it as well. I mean, what did you take away from all that?
Yeah, there was 45 minutes before the game when every position group that was coming out to warm up was getting booed or cheered, or probably both for a lot of them. The defensive line for the Chiefs came out and got booed like crazy, and then Chris Jones was sort of embracing it and getting the crowd into it, and then all of a sudden it just like flipped, and they were cheering. They just were pumped to have football here. It felt like last night, whether it was a 4-yard completion or very first drive when Patrick Mahomes just attempts to go deep and it travels 60, 65 yards in the air, the crowd went nuts. Incomplete pass.
You know what I imagine that when Pele, or when some professional soccer teams did tours in the United States.
I don't know where this is
70s
going,
or
but I'm
80s,
excited to hear.
I feel like American crowds were probably excited for soccer, but had no idea what they were doing. We're cheering wildly when a ball was booted out of bounds, something like that. I feel like there was a little bit of that last night, but the enthusiasm, I think most of the talk about if the NFL wants a team in a outside the United States, and it sure as hell seems like they do. Most of the talk has been London.
Yeah, this makes sense.
I don't know why this doesn't make more sense than that. It's geographically, the altitude's a thing that they got to get around. The stadium, they'd have to do some stuff to the stadium.
For sure.
They'd
Elevators.
have to update it. Yeah. There's some stuff they got to work around, but I think this might make sense. I've been to London, but not for an NFL game. But I just wonder if that sports ticket is more sort of fragmented by all the soccer teams there. I know there's a league here, but it seems like this is more ripe for some growth.
Plus the travel too.
Yeah.
The Chiefs took a normal trip to get here.
It was a longer flight than normal, but you were like not overseas. They didn't fly over an ocean.
They didn't. When they went to London, they had to go a day early to get used to everything. They were fearing jet lag.
Yeah.
For this game, they traveled as normal. Yeah.
I think if anything too, the Chargers had a lot of fans here, which we've all covered a lot of games at StubHub or whatever it's called these days, and even at Qualcomm. I think this is the most Chargers fans I've ever seen in the stadium rooting for them. You're right, it was very enthusiastic out there, and it was. I just can't get over that anthem. Those anthems were chilling.
Yeah, and at halftime, I don't know what the song that was at halftime.
Me neither, but it was great too.
I don't know if that was their version of God Bless America or something, but it was fantastic. It's like a 80,000 person sing-along. Because that's the other thing too, is like, we were talking about like how many people from Kansas City are coming down for the game. I'm sure there were, I don't know, a lot of people, some people, whatever, but I think that stadium, that wasn't Chiefs fans that flew down from Kansas City or Des Moines or Chicago or whatever. I think that was people from Mexico City, from places around here, which is a very cool thing for the league.
I thought, to all these points, one thing, we did see all these jerseys of different teams, and I thought almost as many of those other teams, in some ways, as we saw the two teams playing, which spoke to the NFL passion. You talked to an NFL executive last week who said 22 million NFL fans or so that they've identified as NFL fans here, which coincidentally, really is coincidentally, is about the same number as the population of Mexico City area. It does seem like fertile ground. One quick thing I was thinking of, I was struck by, it was a pro-Chargers crowd in the end, right? I think ultimately that the noise boomed more for the Chargers, but I think the biggest single ovation of the night was, for an individual, was when Patrick Mahomes
announces the captain for the coin toss. I agree.
Really testimony to his star power.
And Kelsey's touchdown too drew a really loud ovation.
It did.
That was a hell of a play.
And the only other thing I was going to add is, you mentioned London before. Actually, during the national anthem and stuff like that, and we were it was the 1968 Olympic Stadium. It reminded me of an Olympics opening ceremony. It was that kind of sort of pride of country, but just also sharing it. I mean,
it was a show. It was just it was a show.
Yeah, and the feeling of the two flags on the field. At the
that was
same
cool
time,
too.
That was.
Yeah,
really
they didn't
cool.
have to do that. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Here's something, going back to the game though, there were a lot of things on the offense that obviously didn't go right. But I thought what did go right though was having all 5 offensive starters on the field. And Eric Fisher,
for a while.
Offensive line for a while. Austin Reeder only missed, I believe, 6 snaps because he came back in the second half. But I saw you tweeting this morning about Eric Fisher. He didn't.
I did.
That wasn't you? Who was that tweeting about? Maybe it was Blair, but
if it was a good tweet, I'll take credit for it.
Okay, it was a good tweet because they pointed out he had 69 snaps. He played all 69 offensive snaps and didn't give up one pressure. And
Mitchell Schwartz. Mitchell Schwartz. And that was
you.
And the reason
good tweet.
I only sent that in our text group because where the rubber meets the road from Big O Tires last week, that was my pick.
That's a hell of a thing because the Chargers have a really good defense. I think they entered the game. I think it was 5th in points and 6th in yards. It might have been 5th in one and 6th in the other. And up front, they're rough. Bosa and Ingram, those guys are men.
And we didn't hear their names at all.
Yeah. For Mitch Schwartz to go through what he did, that's as close as he is to injured, right? He actually missed a snap last week in Nashville. For him to do that on that, it was just that guy is as good at his job as, I don't want to say Mahomes, but he's in an elite level at that right tackle spot.
There's 2 guys on this team that you can argue are the best in their position in the NFL, and it's Mahomes and Schwartz.
Yeah, I think Tyreek and Kelsey are probably close. Kelsey probably is, right?
Sure. Yeah.
With Gronkowski gone, I would put him up there. Absolutely.
And Tyreek's got to be top 5, right? But yeah, you're right.
Well, you know how Chiefs fans sometimes will overreact. So
what?
Your overreaction or your reaction or your react to Patrick Mahomes' game last night, concerned or not concerned?
Not concerned. That's the worst game of his professional career, right? Can we say that?
Yeah.
Jacksonville last year.
He made plays in that game. I know, maybe his passer rating. I don't know what the passer rating was.
182 yards was actually his career low.
Yeah.
Yards, passing yards,
correct.
He in that game he had 2 interceptions and no touchdowns in that Jacksonville game. One of the interceptions was sort of an arm punt. It was a 3rd down that he threw down the left sideline. But he also made some plays in that game. And look, like maybe this one was, maybe that the Jacksonville was worse, but I thought he was just ineffective in a way that we haven't really seen. Other than, I mean, the one argument might be the first halves of the Patriots games last year, but then he came out in the second half of both those games and was just lights out. And he didn't come out in the second half and was lights out. So yeah, I think it was the worst game of his professional career. But I mean, like
how much do you weigh in though?
25 or whatever others where he looks like the best quarterback we've ever seen.
How much do you weigh in how good he was on the scramble? Because that was obviously a great sign. The fact that he was able to do that and, 2 weeks off of this injury.
Two scrambles, really, a 24-yarder and a 20-yarder, and just to put it in context, the longest other run by any Chief was 8 yards. So those were handy, and those were meaningful runs. And I think you were saying this about the knee. I mean, he said last night that it wasn't just that he I think Adam Teicher asked him if he had tweaked the knee on one of the runs. He goes, no, I got hit on the knee. And it was really the first time I really got hit, and I feel good.
It looked like he limped a little bit. The one that was right to left on your television screen on the far sideline from where we were, it looked like he got up and was limping just a little bit. But then it was just like nothing ever happened. That was a good sign.
Yeah. Let me flip that question around, because we know Tyreek Hill suffered a hamstring injury last night, and then depending on the severity, hamstrings can linger.
Yep.
So
he did call it a strain with the bye coming up. I don't think that's going to be too. I thought it was key that he called it a strain. He didn't say an injury. He didn't say we'll have to see how this is. He specifically already called it a strain.
And I don't know if this means anything either, but it was interesting that it took them a little while even to decide to take him into the locker room. Like I think they were really figuring he might be able to go for a little bit. Then they just thought, let's go see.
When they came out after halftime, he was doing his. He just doesn't. He looks like kind of human when he does this, but that like sort of like those high knee kind of stretches where it just looks
like at 50% is quicker than like any of us could do it. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, he's about to play. But then after that, he was just standing, obviously without his helmet, was limping a little bit. But he just, I guess we're all kind of saying the same thing here. He didn't play. He didn't come back and play.
Right.
So that's a problem. But it wasn't carted off the field.
Right.
And he stood on the sidelines, unlike Damian Williams, who didn't come back out on the field after he suffered the rib injury. So that is a huge thing. So you're not worried at all going forward?
Well, to me, that's one of the reasons actually these sort of topics coincide, because I think one of the reasons Mahomes was able to scramble a lot is because the Chargers played heavy man-to-man defense. I haven't done the tally on it. We haven't really had time to go back and watch it, but a lot of plays, a lot of receivers were going in one direction. The other, because they're all in man-to-man, the other half of the field opens up. And certainly the Chargers probably called a lot more personnel, man-to-man personnel once Tyreek Hill's out of the game. Yeah. That was a 3-week storyline for us, was the fact that they couldn't beat man-to-man when Tyreek Hill wasn't on the field.
Yeah.
Coming up now, we got the bye week. A lot of injuries to consider here. We talked about Hill, we talked about Damian Williams. Reader, we're not worried about. LaShawn McCoy, Reed called it a head injury, which sometimes usually translates out to concussion. Jordan Lucas has a shoulder injury. Where are we right now with injuries, knowing you've got the Raiders coming up? That's a game that was flexed because the NFL wants to take advantage of a larger audience, but a lot of implications going into this bye week. What should the Chiefs concentrate on before they take on the Oakland Raiders at Arrowhead Stadium bye?
Well, I mean, first things first, this seems like the perfect time for a bye week for a team that has really, I mean, it seems like an inordinate number of injuries. Now, we were in our own little echo chamber on the team we cover, so I don't know, maybe a lot of other teams have this many injuries, but this seems like a really unusual amount to me. And look, if you're thinking about, as of 12-1 when they play the Raiders, that's the stretch run. I mean, that's it. That's where you get your playoff positioning. That's where you become who you are or you don't. So I think this is, I guess my biggest thought is get healthied up, as former Missouri coach Larry Smith used to say. Just that's the biggest thing for them right now, I think.
Let's kind of kick that back to you, Herbie, because you asked a lot of guys in the locker room about that last night, just the plan during the bye week.
I don't want to give away my story because that's a story for the bye week.
You're teasing to it.
I will say this. The Chiefs, some of the Chiefs players I talked to last night are well aware of what the Raiders are doing right now. Reggie Ragland says, when I asked that question, he muttered an expletive, and he said, of course we know what's going on. The Raiders have won 3 games in a row right now. They're 6-4. They're a half game back of the Chiefs, who are 7-4. And there are a lot of stuff they know they got to get right. You know, the defense is coming on at the right time, but these injuries, you got to get healthy here. That's a big game in Week 13. When's the last time, you know, the Raiders and the Chiefs met with a game with AFC West implications this late in the season?
We,
I can't think of one.
I think we talked about this last week, but it bears repeating, like when we're talking about the injuries. All of these injuries, other than like Breland Speaks and Xavier Williams, right, before the season, have just been, well, he'll be back in 3-4 weeks. Okafor and Agba, I think those are real things. You know, Agba is out for the year, right?
Correct.
And, you know, they've got depth in that spot, but not nearly as much depth as they had when they still had Speaks and Agba. You know what I mean? It's like, those are the two injuries that I think like have some kind of subtle effect on how this team is going to play up front, and it's just a key thing, because that defense. Look, if the defense plays the way that it did, and again, we can make our Phil Rivers jokes, you know, and some of them are funny, but if the defense can play the way that they did last night, going forward, 100% a Super Bowl team. You know, it's absolutely a Super Bowl team. But that depends on the health and these things kind of clicking at the right time. I mean, it's just, you just said it, like the bye's coming at the right time. Andy Reid is 1,001 after a bye or whatever it is, and that's a good opponent to have. You know,
these numbers are going to really stack up weird, right? They're going to have this overwhelming Andy Reid after the bye week stat, whatever that is, and the 24-3 against the AFC West in the last 5 years, whatever it is. In fact, I started to look this up last night. I didn't get a chance, but at some point I'm sure we should try to amplify that divisional superiority thing. I think his numbers, his first 6, 7, 8 years in Philadelphia, except for maybe the first season, were extraordinary also against division rivals there. And it's you know, reasonable to think that's a trend.
and it's not just, we're talking about the Raiders, and deservedly so, but the game after the Raiders is in Foxborough.
Yeah.
One game at a time.
Yeah.
One game at a time.
They're coming out smoking, man. It's you just said it, right? This is the stretch run. This is it.
Just to take a couple questions to show we actually are paying attention to you guys as well.
We are live.
A couple people pointed this out, and we actually pointed it out live, that Mike Williams at the end of the game was called out of bounds, and that could have been a game-changing play.
That was going to be a column if the Chiefs, you know, if they gave up that touchdown. And then the ensuing, that would have absolutely a 2-point conversion where Mike Williams would have been wide open.
Right.
On that play. Yeah, that was a big play.
What was weird about that play for us was just to bring you to the scene a little bit, was that the logistics here at the stadium were such that 3 of us had to go downstairs while that was going on, and we thus were in front of a TV and able to see replays over.
Because we did not have a TV in the press
box. There were
box.
no TVs up in the press box.
They left me in the press box.
First, this is a total first world problem.
It couldn't be more of a first world
we
problem.
We didn't have replay ability last night in the press box.
Sudden Sam McDowell here was able to see and point out to me while we were looking at it. Right then, actually, I think you saw it at first.
He was he was touched as he was coming down, and
like,
he was in bounds.
Why is the clock stopped? And that was certainly 20 seconds.
For sure.
And
it takes Phillip Rivers 20 seconds to do the 40.
So that would have been, that was 44 seconds left instead of 24 seconds left, and boy, that would have been a good column.
One more question. We're getting asked by our own people, and I think Sam should answer this. What was the story on the kiss cam?
Who's asking that?
It's our own people.
There was a level of enthusiasm for the participants in the kiss cam that I've just never seen in the States. You know, like it seems like in the United States, like the kiss cam is the same thing every time. It's like, oh, a little peck or whatever.
And you end with the 85-year-old couple.
Yeah. Every once in a while, you flash to like players in the dugout in a baseball game, and they'll like either like laugh it off or sometimes they'll bring it in for a smooch. But it was PG-13 stuff last night.
Some of it was R. Some of it was R related.
You got on the kiss cam, you were letting it fly.
The crowd was so ready for it too that you could tell it was not a unique experience last night. It was like the way, if you could picture the way the crowd reacts in America to the T-shirt toss. Whenever the kiss cam was announced it was coming on, it was like, oh my God. I never watched the kiss cam, to be honest, but last night it was like, what is going on here?
It's a little different, but it reminded me a little bit of, I happened to be at the game Missouri lost 73-0 at Texas A&M back in the day, and the Aggie tradition is kissing your date after a touchdown or a field goal.
We're good.
And that was getting a little much.
some kind of a final thought.
Final thought. We're out.
Yeah, we got about 1 minute here. Rapidly. Okay, rapidly. What is your fondest memory of coming to Mexico City?
The salsa that I put on these tacos yesterday changed my life. I felt lifted 6 to 12 inches off the ground from this stuff. It was like a flavor that I've never had in my life. Then immediately went to hiccups. Like tears came down my face. It was something I'll never forget. That salsa. It was great.
What about you, Mac?
I know this is cliche, but it was like the hour leading up to the game that I actually turned to all you guys and I said, this is going to be awesome. Just because the crowd was so ready just to see an NFL game. And I know we thought it was a Chargers partial crowd, but it was because the instruction video, I think, told them you need to root for the Chargers for this game. You need to be loud on third downs. I think otherwise maybe it could have been more split 50-50. Sam made a good point that maybe some Chiefs fans made the trip last year and it prevented them from making the trip down this year. The game was canceled so late they probably went ahead and went. But I thought the crowd was unbelievable. And it was just awesome to sort of introduce them to the NFL because I think for a lot of people it's their first time probably seeing it live.
One of my highlights was you saying that because you're such a cynical guy that to see you actually moved by it was like, wow, all right. I really did love the anthem. That'll stick with me. But of course I love seeing Tyrann Mathieu do what I've been predicting he would do all these weeks.
7
more or
yard
less.
shy.
Making me look like an oracle that I
You
am.
almost, I almost even broke the no cheering in the press box rule when that happened, just for you. Not
all
for
looked at him.
Not for the Chiefs, not for
It was.
Tyrann Mathieu, just for your sake.
I think there actually were people around us looking at like, why are these three guys who are covering the team looking at that other guy covering the team? But it hurts. It's hard to be right all the time.
My biggest takeaway, and I immediately looked at Sam when it happened, they love doing the wave in Mexico City, and it was phenomenal. It brought back memories of sitting in the stands and everybody's going up, and even Sam had to say it was the only venue that he would allow that.
Absolutely. I hate the wave, but here, let it go, guys. This was great.
Well, guys, that's a wrap for us, the A-team. I'm Herbie Teope, Sam McDowell, Sam Mellinger, and Vahe Gregorian.
Wow.
I almost said Vahe Mellinger. They're
Welcome to the
related.
family, buddy.
We'll catch you later on Thursday at Big O Tires and Lee Summit. We'll be in McDowell's country, but with the A-team from Mexico City. Adios.